There was a small black dot on the smoke detector I had never noticed before. I only saw it because the afternoon light hit it at a strange angle, and I stood there for a moment staring at it, feeling something cold move through my chest. I had lived in that house for 19 years. I knew every crack in the ceiling, every loose floorboard, every sound the hallway made at night. But I had never seen that dot before. I unscrewed the detector slowly, and there it was, a tiny wireless camera, no bigger than a coat button, wired in and aimed directly at my living room couch. My son Darnell had been watching me. He had been watching me in my own home, in the house I had paid for, in the rooms where I thought I was finally free to be tired in peace. And for 3 weeks after I found it, I said absolutely nothing. I went about my days the same as always. I sat on that couch, I drank my coffee, I watched my programs. I let him watch, because I needed to understand what he was looking for. And what I found out was worse than anything I had imagined sitting in that room alone. Before we go any further, I need you to think about something. If you found out someone you loved had been watching you in secret, would you confront them immediately, or would you stay quiet and wait to see what they did next? Think about that. Because Marcus Reid made a choice that night that changed everything. Keep watching, because what Darnell was looking for and what Marcus eventually found is not what you are expecting. Marcus Reid was 61 years old when he found the camera. He had spent the better part of his adult life being the kind of man other people leaned on, not because he asked for the job, but because it had been assigned to him somewhere along the way without anyone using formal words. He was the one who showed up. He was the one who answered the phone at 2 in the morning. He was the one who co-signed the loan, watched the kids, drove the extra hours, and said nothing when his name was left out of the thank you speech at the family dinner. He was a machinist for 33 years before a back injury forced him into early retirement. He had a pension, a small savings account, and a paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Clover Heights. He had earned those things slowly, painfully, and without shortcuts. His son Darnell was 34. He was the youngest of Marcus's 2 children. His daughter Priya was 38 and lived in another city with her husband and their 2 daughters. Darnell had never really left. He had gone to community college for 2 years, dropped out, worked a series of jobs that never lasted more than a few months each, and spent most of the last decade cycling between friends' couches, short-term rentals, and the spare bedroom at Marcus's house. Darnell was charming. People liked him almost immediately. He had a wide smile and a talent for making people feel like they were the most important person in the room. Marcus had loved that about him when Darnell was a boy. As an adult, Marcus had slowly come to understand that Darnell used that charm the same way other people use a credit card, spending warmth he had not actually saved up, and running from the bill when it came due. Marcus had let Darnell move back in 8 months before the night he found the camera. Darnell had called on a Thursday evening, voice low and shaky, saying his landlord had given him 30 days and his girlfriend had left and he had nowhere to go. Marcus had listened, said yes, and started making up the spare room before the call was finished. That was how Marcus had always worked. Decision first, questions later. It was the part of himself he was most proud of. It was also the part of himself that had cost him the most over the years. Darnell moved in with 2 duffel bags and a laptop. By the second week, he had also brought a large television, a gaming console, 3 boxes of kitchen appliances he never used, and a habit of leaving the back door unlocked past midnight. Marcus said nothing about the door. He said nothing about the dishes in the sink, the phone calls in the hallway that went quiet whenever Marcus walked by, or the way Darnell had started looking at Marcus's desk drawer, the one where Marcus kept his checkbook, with a kind of focused attention that made something uncomfortable move through Marcus's stomach. He noticed everything. He had always been that kind of man, quiet watcher, long memory. He had learned it from a childhood in a loud household where the only way to protect yourself was to read the room before anyone else did. He did not say what he noticed. He stored it. He filed it away in the back of his mind the way he used to file maintenance records at the factory, careful and dated and kept for when they would matter. The smoke detector had been in the same spot on the living room ceiling for 11 years. It was a standard round white detector that Marcus had installed himself when he replaced all the detectors in the house after a news segment about fire safety. He had never thought about it since. On a Tuesday afternoon in mid-October, he was stretching his back the way his physical therapist had shown him, arms raised, neck tilted, eyes drifting up toward the ceiling. The afternoon light was coming through the blinds at a low angle, the kind of flat gold light that only happened in late fall, and it landed directly on the smoke detector. Marcus saw the dot. He was not sure at first. He told himself it was probably a piece of dust or a manufacturing detail he had never noticed. He got a chair, climbed up slowly because of his back, and held his face close to the detector. The dot was a lens. It was small and precise and had a thin wire running into the side of the detector through a hole that had been drilled clean and neat. Someone who knew what they were doing had put it there. Marcus came down from the chair and stood in the middle of his living room for a long time. He thought about who had access to his house. He thought about who had been inside his house with enough time and privacy to climb up and work on that ceiling. He thought about the 2 weeks when Darnell had been in the house alone while Marcus visited his sister in Millbrook. He thought about Darnell's new laptop and the way Darnell sometimes sat in the kitchen with his headphones on, screen angled away in the evenings after Marcus went to his room. He thought about the drawer with the checkbook. He thought about Darnell's voice on that Thursday call 8 months ago, low and shaky, and he wondered for the first time whether the shakiness had been grief or performance. Marcus put the smoke detector back exactly the way he found it. He tightened the screws. He made sure the lens was aimed at the same spot. And then he went to the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea and drank it slowly, standing at the counter, looking out at the yard where he had planted tomatoes every summer for 2 decades. He did not call anyone. He did not say anything to Darnell at dinner that night. He passed the bread basket, asked about Darnell's job search, and listened to the same answer he had been getting for 8 months: leads, interviews, close calls, timing issues. He nodded. He cleared the table. He went to his room. 3 days later, Marcus drove to an electronics store in the next town and bought a small device the size of a deck of cards. The man at the store explained how it worked. It detected wireless signals. Marcus tested it in the parking lot and then again in his car, and then he drove home, went room by room very slowly and quietly while Darnell was out, and found 2 more cameras. One was in the hallway outside his bedroom, built into a clock that had appeared on the hallway shelf 2 weeks after Darnell moved in. Marcus had noticed the clock but assumed Darnell had brought it from storage. The other was in Marcus's home office, hidden in the spine of a thick dictionary that Marcus kept on the bottom shelf and never used. That one was aimed directly at his desk. Marcus stood in his office for a long time after finding the third one. 3 cameras, 3 specific locations: the living room where Marcus spent his evenings, the hallway outside his bedroom door where Marcus had private phone calls when he did not want to be overheard, and his desk where he kept his financial papers, his checkbook, his pension statements, and the password notebook that he had written in shorthand that only he understood. This was not curiosity. This was not Darnell checking to make sure his father was safe. This was surveillance. This was purposeful, patient, targeted watching. And Marcus understood in that moment that whatever Darnell had been building toward for the past 8 months, he had not yet made his move. The cameras were still running. Darnell was still collecting. Whatever he was waiting for, he had not found it yet. Marcus put everything back the way he found it and went to make another cup of tea. He spent the next 3 weeks thinking. He thought about what Darnell could possibly want badly enough to wire a man's own house against him. The most obvious answer was money. Marcus had a pension. He had a savings account with a decent amount in it. He had the house, which was paid off and worth considerably more than when he had bought it. He had no will on file at a lawyer's office, which he now understood was a gap that someone watching him very carefully would have noticed. He thought about whether Darnell might be in some kind of trouble, debt, a legal situation, something financial that had been chasing him since before the eviction. He thought about whether Darnell had made promises to someone using Marcus's name or Marcus's assets as the backing. He thought about his daughter Priya. He had not spoken to her in 3 weeks because she was busy with her own life and he did not want to worry her with Soam. I think he was still trying to understand. He thought about whether Priya knew anything. He thought about whether Darnell had reached out to Priya. He decided he would not call her yet. He needed to know more before he pulled anyone else into this. He started keeping a written record, not on his computer where Darnell could theoretically access it, but in a small green notebook that he kept in the inside pocket of his winter coat in the closet. He wrote down dates, times, observations, what Darnell said at dinner, who Darnell called and for how long, using only what Marcus could gather from one side of the conversation. He wrote down the names of the 2 men who had visited the house since Darnell moved in. Friends, Darnell said casually, though Marcus had never seen either of them before. He wrote down the days Darnell came home late, the days Darnell was agitated, the day Darnell had asked very carefully and with a lot of casual preamble whether Marcus had ever thought about putting the house in a trust. Marcus had answered that question with a vague non-answer. Yes, he had thought about it. He had not decided anything yet. Darnell had nodded and changed the subject, and Marcus had filed the question in the back of his mind where all the other things lived. Now it lived in the green notebook. On the 22nd day after finding the first camera, Marcus called a lawyer. He used his cell phone, walking around the block far from the house and the cameras. He had been referred to this lawyer by a friend from his old job, a woman named Coretta who had been through her own family property situation a few years back and had come out of it with her house and her peace. The lawyer's name was Douglas Ware. Marcus explained the situation in general terms: a family member staying in his home, concerns about surveillance, concerns about potential financial manipulation, and a desire to understand his legal position and protect his assets before anything came to a head. Douglas Ware listened without interrupting and then asked very precise questions. By the end of the call, he had given Marcus a short list of things to do: get the cameras documented by someone other than Marcus himself, consult with a private investigator who dealt in digital surveillance cases, Make no changes to financial accounts yet, because any sudden moves could be used to create a narrative of Marcus behaving erratically. And put together a will and a trust as soon as possible quietly through Douglas's office, without mentioning it to anyone in the household. Marcus thanked him and walked back to the house. Darnell was in the kitchen making food and called out a cheerful greeting when Marcus came through the front door. Marcus called back the same way he always did, hung up his coat and sat down in the living room in front of the camera like he always had. He picked up the remote and turned on the television. He watched the evening news. He looked tired and unhappy in the way a 61-year-old man who has had a long life sometimes looked in the evenings. He knew the camera was watching, he gave it nothing useful. The private investigator Marcus hired was a woman named Sandra Ockhaffer. She came to the house while Darnell was out on one of his 2-day trips to stay with friends, which happened about twice a month. Sandra spent 4 hours in Marcus's house. She photographed all 3 cameras. She extracted the model numbers and serial information without removing them. She checked his home network and found a secondary router hidden in Darnell's room, connected to a separate cloud account that was storing footage. She pulled the account's metadata without logging in and gave Marcus enough information to understand the scope. The cameras had been running for 7 months. 7 months of footage stored in a private cloud account linked to an email address that Darnell had set up using a name Marcus did not recognize. Marcus sat across from Sandra at his kitchen table, looking at the printed report she had brought, and he felt something clarify inside him. Not anger, though the anger was there underneath everything like a slow, low heat. What he felt most clearly was a kind of cold understanding. This had been planned before Darnell called him on that Thursday. The shakiness in Darnell's voice, the story about the landlord, the deliberate vulnerability, it had been a setup. Not in a way that made Darnell a stranger or a monster, but in a way that made everything Marcus had been willing to excuse, every benefit of the doubt he had offered his son over years of late starts and borrowed money and broken promises, feel like it had been studied and used against him. He paid Sandra and thanked her, and asked her to send everything to Douglas Ware directly. He made dinner. Darnell came back the next day in a good mood, full of stories from his time away, laughing and easy the way he always was when he had been somewhere that recharged him. Marcus listened, he asked a few questions, he laughed in the right places, he passed the salt. By this point Marcus had also done something else. He had spoken to his sister Verona, who lived in Millbrook, without specifics, just asking whether Darnell had been in contact with her recently. Verona, who had always had a complicated relationship with Darnell, told Marcus that Darnell had called her twice in the past month. The first call was short and she had not thought much of it. The second call was longer. Darnell had asked her whether she knew if Marcus had written a will. He had framed it as concern. He had been thinking about how unprepared the family would be if something happened to Marcus, and he wanted to make sure his father was taken care of. Verona had told Marcus this in a careful voice, the way she always spoke when she was not sure how to deliver bad news. Marcus thanked her, said he was fine, told her he was dealing with something and would explain more soon. After he hung up, he sat quietly for a while. Then he added the detail to the green notebook. The will conversation with Verona was the bridge between surveillance and the next step. Darnell was not just watching Marcus. He was also doing reconnaissance with other family members, building a case or a claim or a narrative. The question of what that narrative was designed to accomplish was the thing Marcus kept turning over. And then, on a wet Wednesday in November, he got his answer. He had been careful not to change his behavior in front of the cameras. He still sat in the living room in the evenings. He still went to his desk. He still made phone calls in the hallway, though he had started having any genuinely sensitive conversations during his walks, a habit change no camera in the house could capture. On the Wednesday in question, he had intentionally left a piece of paper on his desk. It was not a real document. It was something Marcus had written himself in his own hand on a plain sheet of white paper. It looked like a list of personal notes about his finances, with numbers, account names, and a rough calculation of what the house was worth. The numbers were real but incomplete, and the account information was slightly wrong in ways that only Marcus would know. He left it visible on the desk where the dictionary camera had a direct line of sight. He went to the grocery store. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, the paper had not moved. But Darnell had been home, his shoes were by the door, and his car was in the driveway. Marcus checked the scanner that Sandra had left him and confirmed that the desk camera had been active the whole time he was gone. 4 days later, Darnell asked Marcus, very carefully and with a lot of casual preamble that was becoming a familiar pattern, whether Marcus had ever thought about updating his financial beneficiaries. He said he had read something online about how old account designations could override a will, and he was just thinking about Marcus's future, just wanted to make sure everything was set up right. He said it with his wide smile and his warm voice and his eyes that were very good at looking sincere. Marcus said he appreciated the thought and that he would look into it. He did not show anything on his face. He had spent 33 years in a factory where you learned to show nothing when the machinery was about to do something unpredictable, because showing fear sometimes made the outcome worse. He nodded at Darnell and went to the kitchen and made coffee. That night, Marcus sat in his room with his cell phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Douglas Ware to check on the status of the will and trust documentation they had been preparing. Douglas told him everything would be ready to sign within the week. The second call was to his daughter Priya. He had been holding back from this call because he did not want to frighten her or put her in the middle of something she could not control from a distance. But he had to tell her now. She deserved to know before anything formal happened. Priya listened without interrupting, which was her way. When Marcus finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said that she had been worried about Darnell for a long time and had been afraid to say it. She said that Darnell had called her too about 6 weeks ago and had asked her whether she thought their father was handling his own finances well, whether Marcus seemed sharp, whether she ever worried that Marcus was getting confused about things. Priya had said yes, their father was fine, and had brushed the conversation aside because she had not known what it meant. She understood now what it meant. Marcus told her what he needed from her, which was not to call Darnell yet, not to change anything in how she communicated with him, and to document the call Darnell had made to her as clearly as she could remember it, dates, quotes, specific questions he had asked. She said she would do it. That night, Marcus told her he loved her. He meant it completely and without complication, the way he had always meant it with Priya, which was one of the cleaner feelings in his life. The third call was to Coretta, the woman who had referred him to Douglas Ware. He did not tell her the details. He just thanked her again, told her that her advice had been worth more than she knew. Coretta laughed and said she was glad and told him to take care of himself. Marcus turned out the light and lay in the dark for a while, thinking about what was coming. Understanding what Darnell was doing required Marcus to think about it clearly and without the filter of love, which was harder than it sounded because the filter of love was not something Marcus could simply remove. Darnell was his son. He had taught Darnell to ride a bike in the parking lot behind the church on Glover Street. He had sat in the hospital with Darnell through a bad appendix scare when Darnell was 16. He had lent Darnell more money than he had ever written down because writing it down had felt unkind at the time, which he now understood had been foolish. The love was real. The love had always been real. But love and clarity were different things, and Marcus had spent too many years choosing love over clarity and paying the quiet, ongoing price of that choice. What Darnell appeared to be building was a case that Marcus was not competent to manage his own affairs. The cameras were there to capture behavior, to find evidence of confusion, of memory trouble, of anything that could be described to a court or a doctor as signs of cognitive decline. The quiet inquiries to Verona and Priya were designed to plant seeds. The conversations about wills and beneficiaries and trusts were designed to test what Marcus knew and what he had already arranged. If Marcus had no will, had not protected his assets, and could be credibly described as confused by 2 or 3 family witnesses, Darnell would have something. It might not have been a full legal case on its own, but it would have been enough to create a mess, enough to apply for some kind of guardianship or conservatorship, enough to insert himself into Marcus's financial decisions, enough to get access to what Marcus had spent a lifetime building. It was not a complicated scheme. It was a patient one. And patience, Marcus reflected, was the one thing he had never given Darnell credit for. He also spent time thinking about who the 2 men were who had visited the house. He had not gotten their names. He had gotten their faces because Marcus always got faces. He described them to Sandra Ackafer in a follow-up call. She said she would look into it. A few days later, she came back with information that made Marcus understand the full shape of the situation. One of the men was a paralegal who worked at a small elder law firm on the other side of Clover Heights. The other was a man who ran a company that handled what was described on their website as family financial consulting and estate planning assistance. Someone had already been brought in. The infrastructure was already being assembled. Marcus went to see Douglas Ware in person the following day. He brought the green notebook and the report from Sandra and the email from Priya with her written account of Darnell's call to her. Douglas read through everything carefully and then looked up at Marcus over his glasses and said that Marcus had done exactly the right things in exactly the right order. He said they had enough to document a pattern of manipulative intent. He said that with the will and trust signed and on file and the asset protections in place, there was very little Darnell could do legally, and any attempt to initiate a competency proceeding would collide with a well-documented, clearly organized man who had been thoughtfully managing his own affairs while keeping precise records of being surveilled in his own home. They signed the will and the trust that afternoon. Marcus named Priya as the primary beneficiary and executor. He added 2 specific charitable organizations as secondary beneficiaries. He gave instructions for the house. He made sure everything was clean, clear, and exactly what he actually wanted. When he walked out of Douglas Ware's office into the gray November afternoon, he felt lighter than he had in months. He went home and made dinners. He had been thinking about when to have the conversation with Darnell, and he had made a decision. He was not going to confront Darnell in anger. He was not going to ask questions Darnell would only lie about. He was not going to spend an evening going back and forth while Darnell ran his charm in circles. He was going to do something cleaner than that. He was going to wait for Darnell to make his move, and he was going to be completely ready when it happened. The move came sooner than Marcus expected. It was a Sunday morning, 12 days after Marcus had signed the will and trust. Darnell came downstairs later than usual, sat across from Marcus at the kitchen table, and said he had been thinking. He said he had been doing some research. He said he had spoken to some people who specialized in helping families navigate estate planning and making sure everyone was protected. He said he wanted Marcus to consider signing over power of attorney, just a financial power of attorney, just to make sure that if anything ever happened, someone who loved Marcus could step in and help manage things. He said he was not trying to take anything. He just wanted his father to be safe. He said all of this with his wide smile and his warm voice. He looked sincere. He had always been very good at looking sincere. Marcus listened to all of it. He let Darnell finish. He let the silence sit for a moment after the last word, and then he said quietly and without any particular emotion that he appreciated Darnell's concern and that he had already handled everything. He had a will, he had a trust. He had a power of attorney arrangement that was already in place with someone he trusted. He had met with his lawyer 3 times in the past 2 months. Everything was taken care of. Darnell's smile tightened. He said that was great, but maybe Marcus should have someone review it, make sure it was done right, make sure there were no gaps. Marcus said his lawyer was a specialist and he was confident everything was correct. Darnell said he had met some people who could take a second look. Marcus said that would not be necessary. The silence that followed was different from the silence before it. It had a texture to it. Darnell looked at Marcus for a moment with an expression that was not quite his usual smile. Something moved through his face and then went back behind the warmth. He said okay. He said he was just trying to help. Marcus said he knew and thanked him and got up to refill his coffee. That evening, Darnell was quiet at dinner. Not hostile, not cold, just quieter than usual. Marcus was pleasant and did not push any conversations. 2 days later, Darnell told Marcus he had been offered a job in another city. He said a friend had connected him with an opportunity he could not pass up. He would need to leave within the month. Marcus said that was wonderful news and asked about the job. Darnell gave details that were thin but delivered with confidence. Marcus nodded and said he was proud of him. Over the next 3 weeks, Darnell packed his things and made preparations. He was friendly. He was occasionally warm in the old way, the way that had always made Marcus love him and excuse him and wait for him to become the person he sometimes seemed capable of being. Marcus was kind. He helped carry boxes. He made good meals. He hugged Darnell before he drove away on a cold Saturday morning and told him to call when he arrived. Darnell said he would. He did not for 11 days. The morning after Darnell left, Marcus went to the living room, climbed up on the chair with his sore back, and removed the smoke detector from the ceiling. He pulled the camera out carefully, disconnected the wire, set it on the kitchen counter. Then he did the same with the hallway clock and the dictionary camera. He laid all 3 devices on the counter in a row. He stood there looking at them for a while. Then he put them in a paper bag, labeled the bag with a date and the word evidence in his careful handwriting, and put the bag in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, behind the folder where he kept the green notebook and the printed reports from Sandra Achafer. He did not throw them away. He kept them because he had learned, over 61 years of being the dependable one, that the things you might need later were always the things that seemed safe to discard in the moment when the pressure was off. He installed new smoke detectors, real ones. He changed the locks that afternoon, not in anger, just because it was the right thing to do, the kind of thing he should have done 8 months ago, and had not because he had not wanted to send a message that felt unkind. Then he sat down in his living room in the clean air of his own house, and picked up his phone and called Priya. She answered on the second ring. He told her Darnell had left. She was quiet for a moment and then she asked how Marcus was doing, not how the situation was doing, but how he was doing her father as a person. He sat with that question for a moment before he answered because it was the right question and it deserved a real answer. He told her he was okay. He told her he was tired in a way that was different from sadness, more like the tiredness after a long job that you are glad is finished but that has still taken something out of you. He told her he did not hate his son. He said that clearly and without hesitation because it was true and he did not want any ambiguity about it. What he felt toward Darnell was something more complicated and more sad than hate. He felt the particular grief of seeing someone you love choose who they are going to be, and having that choice be a smaller thing than you had hoped for. Priya listened to all of it and said she understood. She said she had always seen something in Darnell that she had not known how to name when they were growing up. She said she was sorry Marcus had gone through this alone for so long. Marcus told her he had not been fully alone, he had Douglas and Sandra and Coretta, and he had had himself, which had turned out to be enough. She asked if she could come visit at Christmas. He said he would love that. In the weeks that followed, Marcus settled back into the rhythms of his days without the weight of constant performance. He had not fully understood how much energy it had taken to sit in that living room every evening behaving naturally while knowing a camera was recording him, to eat dinners across from a man who had built a surveillance system into the house, to be patient and ordinary and give nothing away. Now that the weight was gone, he felt the difference in his body, in his sleep, in the quality of the silences in his house. He started doing things he had been putting off. He repainted the spare room. He cleaned out the garage and sold 3 boxes of things he had been holding onto for no real reason. He started going to a Tuesday evening community program at the library where people did woodworking projects together, a thing he had been meaning to join for 2 years and kept postponing. He went to his physical therapy appointments, without the background distraction of a complicated situation running in the back of his mind. He called Verona and told her the full story. Verona was characteristically direct about it. She said she had known for years that Darnell had a problem with how he saw other people's things, that he looked at the people around him and calculated what they had and how he might access it, and that she had not known how to say that to Marcus without it landing wrong. Marcus told her he understood. He was not sure he did fully, but he understood that she had been trying to protect something too, in her own way. Darnell called 5 weeks after leaving. He was back in Clover Heights, he said. The job had not worked out. Things had fallen through. He was staying with a friend. He was wondering if maybe he could stay at Marcus's for a little while just until he got settled again. Marcus sat with the phone against his ear for a moment. He looked around his living room, at the new smoke detector on the ceiling, at the walls the same color they had always been, at the couch where he sat every evening without anyone watching. He thought about what he wanted to say. He thought about what was true. He told Darnell that he could not do that. He said it without anger and without a long explanation because a long explanation would only become a negotiation and Marcus was done negotiating. He said he loved Darnell and he hoped Darnell found his footing, but the house was no longer available. He said he would help Darnell find a resource or a program if Darnell was willing to genuinely look for one. He said that offer was real and standing, but the door to moving back in was not open. Darnell was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that Marcus was being cold. He said he was family. He said a father was supposed to be there for his children no matter what. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. When Darnell finished, Marcus said that he had been there for Darnell for 34 years in every way he knew how to be. He said he still loved him. He said the answer was still no. Darnell hung up. Marcus set the phone down on the table and looked at it for a moment. He thought about how that conversation would have gone if he had not found the camera, if he had let Darnell back in without knowing what he now knew, if he had signed anything Darnell had placed in front of him. He thought about what his life might look like in that version of things. He thought about it clearly and without drama and with the full awareness of how close it had come. He got up and went to the kitchen and made dinner for one, which had always been one of the small pleasures of living alone. A meal sized exactly right for one person, made at the time he wanted with no one to manage around it. He put on the radio. He ate at the table by the window where he could see the yard, the same yard where the tomatoes grew every summer, the same yard where the light came in at a low angle in October and caught things that had been there all along, just waiting to be seen. He thought about what he would plant in spring. There was a specific kind of peace that Marcus had not felt in years, maybe not since before his retirement, maybe not since his wife had passed 8 years ago and he had rebuilt his life from the shape that her absence left. It was not the peace of everything being resolved, because not everything was resolved. Darnell was still out there making his choices. The relationship was changed in a way that might never fully come back, and Marcus had sat with that truth long enough by now to know that he was going to grieve it in the way you grieve things that were lost slowly over a long time before the final break. But the peace he felt was the peace of a man who had stopped pretending, who had looked at something true and ugly and had not looked away from it, had not talked himself into softening it until it was comfortable, and had made clear decisions from a place of full knowledge. That kind of peace was not loud. It did not announce itself. It just sat there in the room with him, warm and steady, like the light through the kitchen window on a quiet evening. He had always been the dependable one. He had carried that role for so long that it had started to feel like his whole identity, like if he stopped carrying it, he would not know who he was anymore. But somewhere over the past 3 months, something had shifted in how he understood what it meant to be dependable. Being dependable did not mean being infinitely available. It did not mean never requiring anything in return. It did not mean allowing people to take more than they gave indefinitely and calling it love. Being dependable meant being honest. Being dependable meant knowing where your boundaries were and holding them with enough firmness that people could actually lean against them and feel that they were real. Being dependable meant protecting what you had built so that it was still there for the people who actually deserved it. He was 61 years old, and he was learning this as if for the first time, and he did not feel embarrassed about how long it had taken. He felt grateful that he had found it when he did. Priya and her family came for Christmas. Her daughters, who were 7 and 10, immediately took over the spare room he had repainted and covered the floor with their things within 20 minutes of arriving, which Marcus found purely delightful. Priya cooked with him, and they talked for long stretches about everything and nothing in the comfortable way of people who trust each other without maintenance. Her husband helped Marcus with a small repair on the back fence that Marcus had been meaning to get to for months and had kept putting off. It was the best Christmas Marcus had spent in years, maybe since before his wife had gone. On Christmas evening, after the girls were in bed and Priya and her husband had turned in, Marcus sat alone for a while in the living room. The tree lights were on. The house was warm. Outside the window, the street was quiet and dark and cold in the way of a winter night that has settled fully into itself. He thought about Darnell. He hoped genuinely that Darnell would find his way to something better, not for Marcus's sake but for Darnell's own. Because being the kind of person who looks at his father's house as a resource to be managed, who watches a man in his own living room through a hidden lens and waits for signs of weakness, who builds a case against the person who would open a door for him at 2 in the morning without a second thought, that was a painful way to live. Marcus had loved his son too long and too fully to pretend otherwise. And whatever had made Darnell into that person, whether it was something Marcus had done or not done, some combination of character and choices and circumstances that Marcus would probably never fully understand, he hoped Darnell would someday find a different way. But hope for someone is not the same as opening your door to them. Marcus knew that now in a way he had not known before. He had spent too many years confusing those two things. Hope can go with you everywhere you go. It is quiet and portable, and it does not require you to put yourself at risk to carry it. He turned off the tree lights and went to bed. In January, Marcus joined a small woodworking group that met twice a week instead of once. He started working on a bench, a proper outdoor bench made from oak, designed to go in the garden near the tomatoes. It was a project that required patience and precision and a willingness to fix mistakes carefully when you made them, which suited him. He had always been good at that kind of work. His hands remembered things his body had learned over decades. In February, Douglas Ware called to confirm that all of Marcus's estate documents were properly filed and that everything was in order. Marcus thanked him and asked about his fee. Douglas laughed and said he had already sent the invoice. Marcus paid it the same day without hesitation because Douglas Ware had done exactly what he said he would do, and Marcus believed in paying people what they were owed for work that was genuinely done. In March, Darnell sent a text. It said he was doing better. He was in a program. He did not ask for anything. He said he was sorry for some things and that he knew he had Tria. Ted Marcus badly. He said he did not expect anything back. He just wanted Marcus to know. Marcus read the text twice. He sat with it for a while. He thought about what was true. He thought about what he hoped. He thought about what he was willing to do and what he was not. He wrote back. He said he was glad Darnell was in a program and that he hoped it helped. He said the door was not closed on having a relationship, but that it would need to be a different kind of relationship than they had had, one with honesty in it, one where Marcus was not managing both sides. He said he would be open to talking when Darnell was ready for that kind of conversation. He did not offer the house back. He did not offer money. He did not reach for the old role, the one where Marcus absorbed everything and asked for nothing and kept saying yes long after yes had stopped making sense. He kept what he had, which was his house and his peace and his carefully tended clarity, and he offered what was real, which was the possibility of something honest between a father and a son. He did not know if Darnell would take it. He did not make the answer to that question the condition of his own peace. He put down the phone. He went out to the garage where the oak bench was coming along nicely, its joints clean and tight, its lines precise and simple. He picked up his tools and got back to work, and the morning light came through the garage window and fell across the wood in long, clean lines, and Marcus Reid felt in the quiet of that ordinary morning exactly like himself. If this story stayed with you, I want to ask you something before you go. Has there ever been a moment in your own life when you finally saw clearly what someone close to you was actually doing? Not what they said they were doing, but what they were actually doing. Did you stay quiet and wait, the way Marcus did, or did you confront it immediately? Leave your answer in the comments because I believe how we handle those moments of seeing clearly says everything about who we are. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story right now, share it with them. They may need Marcus's kind of quiet strength more than you know.